everything is about energy. Everything is about action, right? Either a call to action, but you have to motivate, right? And so you have to be careful about how you motivate, because you can over motivate, you can motivate in the wrong direction. And so all of this stuff, you have to go too far to know how far too far is.
Welcome back to the Post-Production Club podcast. You know, it is so hard to make a living as a filmmaker, especially as a composer, let alone as a composer in Hollywood. So in this episode, we chat with the deeply thoughtful and seasoned musical composer, Evan Frankfort. Evan's been in the industry for a long time. He's one of the most experienced we've had on the show so far. He scored throwback shows like Beverly Hills, 90210, and the many, many seasons of The 100, which is on the CW. His most recent work includes scoring for NBC's Wild Kingdom and is currently the head of music, overseeing the entire music bed for 25 different shows. I do not know how he does it. He's got a pretty crazy story that we talk about on how he broke into the industry, and that's what the show's all about. Everyone has a different experience, and I find it fascinating how people have found a way to make art and make a living and raise a family and balance life and you get my point. But somehow Evan has done it, and that is super impressive. So let's dive in. All right, welcome, Evan.
Thank you.
How are you doing today?
Great, man. It's great to meet you, Gavin, and thanks for having me.
Where does this podcast find you?
So I am in Thousand Oaks, California. I did the thing. If you live in LA and you have kids, and you want that sort of ET experience where all the kids are riding around on bikes and in a neighborhood, this is where you move, and it's been awesome. We moved here about I think 11 years ago, and moving is tough because you start over with people. And my wife and I, when we got married, we moved to Lake Arrowhead, which is our local mountains. And we just thought, we'll hold hands and be in love and frolic about. And it was great, except we missed our peeps. And so we came back a couple years later with sort of newfound love and respect for what we'd left behind. And just when you thought traffic can't get any worse and houses can't get any more expensive, everything was just double, twice the amount of traffic. Prices were double. So joke was on us, but we learned a lot, and we had a lot of apprehension about moving again and subjecting ourselves to the same challenge. But we moved this little community, and we met someone who introduced us to everyone, and within like a year we had like these 10 families that we would we'd go on vacation, and without them it felt like, what are we doing, why are we here? So we call them our family. And since that happened, I would say it's much like the suburbs of Chicago, like where you are. Winnetka and all that stuff. I did a show called Swingtown that took place in those suburbs, and I've worked with a lot of people from Chicago, and that's a more organized version of what we have. But I have to say, I kind of love it. It takes a lot off the table, a lot of stressors of life. On the other hand, it's removed, and you kind of have to work to get certain things happening. But you do it, and it's great. So that's the long story.
Wow, 11 years ago, where did you move from?
So I'm a native Angelino. The first Jew in LA is a relative of mine. 1840, he was there. So my family's been there a long time. And he was a fascinating guy. He was a tailor and a sheriff. There's this, you'll see a lot of streets with the word Crest in the street, like Linda Crest and O'Crest. And Crest family was like a big land family. They owned a ton of land. And so my whatever relative was their tailor, and he became the sheriff. And He went down to fight in the Mexican-American War. I think he died down there. Um, but the long and the short is the gang's been here a long time. I think everybody wants what they didn't grow up with. If you're from a small town, you move to the big city. I just kind of wanted a slower and I don't know, just more chill life. And so it worked for me to move out here. I just miss architecture. You know, you guys have great buildings, and LA has some great stuff. It's scattered and littered, and you know, there's no real design to it. You know, you'll go one block, amazing, and then you go another block, you go, what happened?
Totally. Chicago really does have incredible architecture. Have you ever done the boat tour downtown?
No,
You know,
no.
neither have I. I talk about it like I have, but I have not, and it's on my list.
We'll have
Yeah.
to go. Amazing.
Um, well, that is fascinating. I want to hear about how you got into the world of composing. I want to hear how you started and what led to you working on shows like the 100 and 90210 and stuff like that.
I think that there's two types of musicians, and people don't really distinguish between them, but I certainly do. Because I come from a long line of people that play instruments really well. My grandmother, who I grew up around the corner from, she was the first woman to graduate from Curtis, and she taught at Juilliard and first chair fiddle. And she had what's called absolute perfect pitch, where she could sit in front of an orchestra and tell you which string on which instrument was how many vibrations, sharp or flat. And, you know, everything made her cringe. I remember listening to Philharmonic with her playing Beethoven's Fifth, and you know, she had to turn it off because they were playing it wrong. I'm like, it doesn't get better than this, lady. Like, what's your complaint? She's like, oh, it's a triplet. They're just playing it static, like da 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 da. It's supposed to be da 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 da. The accent on the one, right? And you know, I think I was 8 or 9 at the time, so nothing really registered, and we didn't really understand each other because I'm not that guy. I really just wanted to play with toys and make things. And so, you know, I see this is my sandbox, and everything is sort of a tool, you know, to make something or to improve something. And so, you know, for me, I was equally interested in gear as I was in, you know, writing music. But like, I had a good ear, right? So I was picking melodies out of songs at 5 or 6 or whatever, and going over to the piano and playing them. And you know, they were all players in my family, so they just assumed that that's what I would be. So they called the dude the super Mac Daddy teacher of the world, and he came over. And if you're going to be a classically trained pianist who's going to get standing ovations, like, he's your guy. And he just chuckled when he saw me. You know, he just, you know, knew instantly this is not what you think he is. Like, I don't even know what to do with this guy. He just wants to play the Happy Days theme. You know, we're not gonna get anywhere with him. And so, you know, they really gave up hope. They didn't think that I was going to be a musician, um, and that was just fine with them, actually, because they, you know, to be a musician is to struggle. And most of them came to their senses. You know, most of them went out and got jobs and joined the workforce, and so they wouldn't wish it on their worst enemy. And so, you know, I really just wanted to write songs, and that's what I did. I immediately started writing music, and you know, I mean, they loved all kinds of stuff, but it was mainly classical. Like, they were, you know, 20th century classical is very different from the rest of classical because it was more adventurous, and you have, you know, Bartok and Stravinsky and people that are really taking chances and breaking rules. You know, a lot of it was governed by religion, and you had to resolve to, you know, major thirds, and everything had to make mathematical sense. And then one day someone said, well, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And you know, Rite of Spring was sacrilege. Like, you know, the church denounced it and like told everybody, like, don't listen to this devil's music, and etc. And you know, that's rock and roll. That's the invention of I'm not going to listen to
Yeah.
my parents' music. And so, as a little brother, are you a little brother or a
Big
big
brother.
brother, or?
Yep.
Only child?
Yep.
Big brother. Okay, so you're more pragmatic. You're more
Well, like,
measured.
well, I guess I
You're
should say I'm
more.
both. I have an older sister and a younger brother, so I've got that classic middle child
Uh,
syndrome where I'm always,
okay, so you feel
yeah,
the
and I'm always
angst.
pining for your admiration.
Yeah, yeah. So there it is. There's this equal parts, recipe to the middle child. Like I've done this profile thing forever.
Okay.
I'm a little brother, so I'm all fuck you.
Yeah,
I'm
you are.
doing it my way, right? But like, there's also you're an older brother, and so you have to think responsibly. So little brothers are just in backlash. Like whatever you do, like. Okay, you're gonna get good grades. You're gonna be neat and tidy. Like, guess who's gonna be the fuck up? Like, that's my job. Like, I have to fill that role because your role is taken. We can't both be responsible.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
I love this stuff. So anyway, my brother was the guy who towed the line. Went to UCLA. He was smart and he was also a musician, but had the sense to say, you know what, I'm going to actually make something of my life. And he did, and God bless him. But I didn't even know that I was like this robot that was anti everything until I was about 30. I was like, hey, it's a lot easier if you're not swimming upstream. It's a lot. So I didn't take notes. I felt like I was capturing lightning in a bottle. Like I'm not gonna, you know, go by your book. I'm not gonna try to remember what I did. I'm just gonna use my ears, trust my instincts, and I'm just gonna let that guide me. And there were note takers all around me, people that could recreate scenarios um, and bless them, they were doing great work and they could pick up where they left off. But I listened to those records that I did in that era, and I couldn't remake them if I tried. Like I can hear generally how it works, but I was running tubes all through the house up into the toaster from the bathtub and putting microphones in the middle and like running it through a pitch effect, taking it down an octave, then distorting it with an amp, and that would be 2% of the sound, right? Like it was just, you did it because it was fun and you didn't know where anything was going to lead, right? You just knew that if I keep going, I'll find the road home. And that's all that I had to guide me. And, when presets came to be, I shunned them, I poo pooed them. And then I started noticing everybody else's records were sounding great and mine were just stagnating. And so that was the first thing that I changed. Is like, okay, I'm going to save my own presets, and then I'm going to be able to jump off where I left,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
off before, and recall and all of that. It's just been a process of not conforming, but embracing convention because conventions work, right? So my uncle was a merry prankster hippie, and you're too young to know what that is, but those guys were like the Berkeley crowd, and they were all like, it was during Vietnam. They were causing a lot of havoc, and um, but in the name of peace, and so they were very idealistic and very sweet, really. But free love and all of those ideas. Swingtown, another reference to Swingtown on paper, and when you see the beginnings of what this looks like, it's very attractive. You're like, oh, you're so chill. You seem to have it all figured out. And then you realize they've shunned all of the conventions. No marriage, no job, I'm not going to join the grid. I'm not going to work 9 to 5 and all that. I understand that, I revolt against it myself, but I feel like the answer is not to toss it out the window. It's to
Mhm.
modify it. These cliches and conventions, they're there for a reason. They've stood the test of time. They do work in a serious way. They don't work for everybody, and they don't always work on modified, but that's kind of what you do is you tweak until things are right. And so that's what it took me. I was about 30 when I discovered that, and I needed to stop feeling pain, um, stop hurting myself in a way where It didn't feel intentional, but it really was, because I just wasn't, proactively trying to steer the ship,
Yeah, so many artists I feel like get in their own way. I know I do that for myself.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a long history of friends who, they get the record deal, and they will basically talk their way out of their career. Like, they'll just do something that either self-sabotages or, just makes the issue super cloudy and no one can solve the problem. It's almost like, if the world isn't going to create madness and chaos for you, you're going to
Yeah.
create it for yourself. It's part of what it is to
Yeah.
be human.
And how many times have did you ever feel like that you for what I'm hearing, it sounds like you were kind of your own barrier in some ways in everything that created you. It's like your secret sauce, but also maybe the thing that could be holding you back. And so how did you
Oh,
overcome
yeah.
that? How did you break through and end up where you are?
I mean, I will say that, kids is an incredibly strong motivator. You get into the kids world, and all of a sudden you see everything, including yourself, especially yourself, differently. You are a provider first and foremost. And if that means you're laying bricks, then that's what you're doing. If that means, you go take a bank job or anything else, then fine. Because this is the thing that matters. You think music is cool. You think the thing that you love is the thing that you could possibly, not live without. But in the end, it's not. It's not the thing, and then you get older and you see things differently. You start to get into a more of a management type of mind, where it's really just about what jumps out of the speakers. You're not thinking in terms of your ego and who generated this idea and what you have to fight for and why. You're just listening and you're saying, okay, it sounds like the problem is in the melody. The problem is in the drums. The problem is in the thing that I did. I mean, I got into this business at a time when everybody had a discipline. So, you were an instrumentalist, you were a producer, you were a mixer, you were whatever, recording engineer, you were a mastering engineer. Um, I wasn't going to be boxed in because I loved it all. I thought, well, I'm going to get tired of playing on records. Like, I want to write the songs, or I want to song doctor, I want to co-write, I want to, be a part of the thing that I'm not trying to solve at this stage, right? Like, you brought me in because your chorus isn't strong enough and you need me to find a way to make it punch. And if I could write it differently, then I can solve it at the source, right? And so then it was, hey, this mix sucks. Let me mix it for you. Um, and then it became like, you know what? The mastering didn't come out right. Let me remaster it for you. And so I was into everything from microphone selection to final passive compression and EQ. And I just felt like I was a control freak for one, but people liked that. And in one point they couldn't tell what to do with me. They're like, I don't know what you are. Like, how do I use you? And then it became very obvious when I'd listen to what they were doing, and I could say, well, the problem is here. And they'd say, well, who do I call for that? I'm like, well, we can call this guy, that guy, or I can take a pass, whatever. And then, well, why don't you start there? And more often than not, I would solve the problem. And so once they have trust in you, they want to have trust in you for everything. So you come from post. I started a post company because for a while I got bored with music and I just wanted to do Foley. I just wanted to, do sound design and sound effects. And I just thought, gosh, this is just the break I need. I mean, when you're working 18-hour days, you'll burn out. You have no choice but to change gears to reignite your love for what you do, um, or else you will want another career. I mean, um, you asked about the 100. That was 7-day weeks, 18-hour days. I mean, this keyboard would wake up in my face, and I'd have impressions of keys in my cheeks, and go right back to work. I mean, it'd be 10 hours that go by and I haven't eaten or gone to the bathroom. Like, it's just like that. And everybody has that story,
Yeah.
you know, 120 hours a week. And I wasn't seeing my kids. I was
Yeah.
miserable. It's a horrible
Yeah.
way to live. So I don't care how much you love what you do. By the end of, a few years of that, you hate what you do. And, um, I was really fortunate. I was ready to give it all up. I said, well, I hate music. I don't
Hmm.
ever want to do music again. Um, and fortunately, I had a friend who was growing in this other lane where, so you asked about 90210 and, the 100 and the shows that I've done that are very linear, traditional TV format or whatever. When you write music, the studio owns it. Okay. It's the same way for sound design, same way for all intellectual property. It's owned by the studio. And your career can go really, really well, but you're always looking for a gig. And when I had this revelation where, like, you're a mouse on the wheel and it's never going to stop, um, I think I realized I needed, just wholesale change. And I had friends who were in the lane where you work for a library and you just write a bunch of music that you want to write. Maybe it gets used, maybe it doesn't. And I thought that model was pretty cool because you're going to be in a lane where you feel fulfilled because you're doing what you want to do. you know I'm sure you get motivated to do a certain kind of scene with VFX and you're just like, I don't know why I'm doing this, I just want to do it. It's cool, it's fun, and that's what's motivating me.
Totally. Yeah, we were talking to another editor, and she was talking about the idea of butt power, of just staying in something, of putting your head down and you're lost in it, and you look up and yeah, 8 hours have gone by. Just that idea of like
Yeah,
time dilation because of something that interests you as you're working on it as a
yeah.
creative.
Yeah, we're traveling at the speed of light. Time stands still. I mean, even when I was miserable, it would do that because you have to acknowledge that everything is mixed, right? Everything is a mixed bag. So there are things that you love and there are things that you hate. And again, back to tweaking. And so that's what I did. I modified convention. I built a library. I had, a whole bunch of music that I owned, and I had this friend, Brian Curb, who he was doing. Well, actually, this is a funny story. So my wife replies to a Craigslist ad. I have my post-production company. Everything's going great. I'm doing shows. I'm very busy. I'm happy, fulfilled. Everything's good. My wife responds to a Craigslist ad. A Craigslist ad. And she says, I got you an interview with this company that is looking for a mixer for their poker show that's on Fox at 2 a.m., 365 days a year. I said, call, cancel, not doing that. We don't do Craigslist ads. And which turns out, like, I couldn't have been more wrong because every time I tell somebody that story, they're like, I got my first great gig from a Craigslist ad. So anyway, really, really funny. I go into the meeting, very reluctantly. And I sit down, I meet a couple guys. I'm like, oh, these are really cool guys. And then I meet the guy who's running the show. Brian Curb is his name. And so immediately we're talking about music and our favorite bands. And, it was like I had toured with some bands that he liked. And anyway, he was such a cool dude, and he treated everybody like, well, first of all, they came up together. They were in college together. They all cut fruit together. They built this company together, and, they were going to live and die by it. And they were brothers. And I saw this instantly, and I was, really moved by it because everybody wants this, but let's just say it's a really, really
Hmm.
difficult thing to find. And so all those guys are now executive producers. They're all running shows. They're all incredibly talented, incredibly cool. And and so I told them, like, at that moment, I said, I really didn't want to take this meeting, and I'm so glad I did, because now that I've met you guys, like, whatever you need, I'll go get you groceries. Like, I don't care. But, like, I want to help. I want to make this bird fly. And so this was like 15 years ago. And, he calls me a week later. He says, hey, so I start mixing shows. Everything's great. Like, it's fun and it's cool and they're great guys. Um, but he calls and says, I got a Judge show. It's going to, be on during the day. And can you write the theme for it? So, sure, no problem. And then I got 6 shows for CBS. Do you think maybe you could give me some music for them? Sure, no problem. Congratulations. That's amazing. Like, whatever I can do. So they, pay me to write a theme, and they would give me a little package to put some music together. And then I started seeing the
Mm.
royalties about a year later. I was like, hey, this has been really fun. And the other thing I'm doing is really not fun. So I called him. I was like, look, I'm going
Mm.
all in with you. All right. He says, you couldn't have picked a better time. I just got 6 shows for NBC. And I'm like, okay, we're off to the races. So I do this. I build it all on spec. For 2 years, I don't make a dime. And, during that time, you get 6 shows for CW, 6 shows for ABC. And it's insane what happens. So he builds this company. They get bought by Hearst, which is a major publishing company and TV company. Hearst owns half of A&E. They own half of ESPN. They've been around forever. Citizen Kane. I'm sure you know some of the background. They buy the company, and by this time, I've sort of become de facto the head of music. Like I said, once they trust you to do something, like, hey, can you liaise with the PROs? Can you know, make something like this happen and that happen? And so clearance, everything sort of falls under my purview because I am the music guy. And so since this happened, my life has been amazing. I mean, the thing to know about Brian Kerb is that he's just as good at everybody's job as they are. Like, this is a guy who, he would memorize everything in a movie. He would listen to it with no picture, with headphones, and just replay the scene in the loop, right? And just like, hear the clothing, hear the dialogue, hear the room treatments, hear the room tone, the AC, you know, all the sound effects and drones and music and how they're separated and why things are represented, and what everything means relative to everything else, and how this scene sets up that scene, and storytelling and everything. So he knows, directing, he knows sound design and effects, and he knows, acting, he knows writing, he knows editing, he knows visual effects, and he's just as good as it gets on everything, right? And so when he calls me and he says, hey, I got an idea, or do you think, you can take some notes real quick on a piece of music, it always gets better. I mean, I can't say that about anybody I've worked with except him. Like, it's 100% trust. Whatever he says, I know it's going to be an improvement. And, with this type of work, there's infinite number of ways to do something great, you know? And so that you're just going to get another take on what's going to be great. So you might feel like what you did was perfect, don't mess with it. But there's something really satisfying about wiping the slate clean and doing the opposite of that and having it still
And
turn out
bringing in
great.
another voice
So,
like you had collaboration just makes it infinitely better.
right, because it's not homogenized, right? Like, I don't care how great you are. At some point, I hear all the threads of you, right? And that's why we love bands. It's just to augment. It's like what you said earlier. We're looking for somebody to do what they do, what you would do better than you would do
Yeah.
it, right? So I play drums, I play all the band instruments, but when I want somebody that's truly great to play drums, it's not going to be me. Like, I can do it, and you probably will be fine with it. But you're going to get a little extra zhuzh from somebody who's a true master at their craft. And so, this concept of a team, this concept of no ego and everything sort of working in service of ideas, right? Everyone working in service of ideas. That's what's carried me from that point where I turned the corner and decided to, float and swim downstream.
So talk about your creative process of scoring film and TV then. What about you stands out from others? What's the thing that you are the master of when you're brought in?
You know, that's a tough question to answer because, you know, the way that I feel about most music is that it's nuts and bolts, right? It's not, truly inspired. It services the gig, right? Whatever the picture is doing, you've done your job like 90 something percent of the time. And, when you come from records, you really live and die by the decisions that you make. And you don't have the benefit of picture, and you don't have um, potentially the picture even weighting you down, right? You can write whatever you want to write and arrange it however you feel like. But with picture, there's nuts and bolts to a scene, but hopefully you're going to. And look, there's so many ways to do this. You can elevate the picture, you can comment against the picture, you can pre-lap sound, and you can set up the picture. You can operate into the next scene and have the listener still recalling the feeling of what happened before in the last scene, something to just thread it together. But for me, I'm not interested in doing whatever is the basic gig, right? I want to express and I want to emote, and I feel like that starts with sounds. So I spend a lot of time building a palette before I even write music, which is not uncommon. You'll watch a picture and you'll say, "All right, well, what does this soundtrack sound like? What are my opportunities?" Right? So they're in a plane or a submarine. I mean, there's a lot of metal, right? So that has to inform your palette. I mean, it doesn't have to, but
Yeah.
it can, and you should mess around with that. So I'm a no stone left unturned kind of guy, and I will literally sit down and approach things a half a dozen ways, and then once I have like very strong feelings about what's working, then I'll do whatever is in service of the picture. I'll write music that I feel like, this really helps sell the emotion of the scene. Like, you come from advertising, you know that everything is about energy, everything is about action, right? Either a call to action, but you have to motivate, right? And so you have to be careful about how you motivate, because you can over motivate, you can motivate in the wrong direction. And so all of this stuff, you have to go too far to know how far too far is. And so for me, it's really just about doing all of the work and not just the work. I mean, there, again, a million ways to do something great. Mark Snow would score the X-Files in real time. 42-minute episode might take 42 minutes to score. Just play it down. And with the right sound and the right movement, and you can feel where the holes in the dialogue are. You can feel where we're building to something. And, when you get into a mode where you've done this a lot and you know the arc of everything, it's automatic. And so a TV show allows you to do that. Um, But what I love about my process is that, I'll do all this work. I'll score an episode top to bottom that will inform how the editors will cut. The editors, I mean, they're amazing with music. I mean, I give them a ton of music. I'll say, here's a package. This is really designed for the nature of this show. Dig into it, do what you want, and they'll have a field day. And 90 something percent of the time, it's perfect, right? But I'll get a call and they'll say, oh, this scene needs a little help, or we're having trouble identifying the direction on this. So, again, I'll do a top to bottom score, and they'll have those new cues, and that will get my wheels turning. And I'll say, okay, I want to write a bunch of new music. I have this unbelievable team. I mean, everybody specializes in something. It's kind of like what we were talking about with a band where, this drummer's better than I am, so he's going to play drums. And so it's like that for everybody. Some people have an expertise with electronics. I mean, I have a killer modular rig and I love using it, but some people are better at that than I am. So let's get them going. Or I'll do my process, they'll do theirs, and
Yeah.
best one wins. Happy to make that you if you're the guy. And so I'll let these guys know, like, this is kind of the direction that we're headed. Interpret that as you will. And then we'll let the editors and producers decide. Like, they'll take the music and they'll, you know, use it in the way that they want. I mean, we give them tons of options with mix outs and stems. And so, they can create any dynamic energy that they're after. But based on what gets used, it informs what we do going forward. And so theoretically, by episode 10, you should have a better score than you did at episode 3. And season 5, season 6, like, this thing should be bulletproof. There should be no question about whether you're doing your best work.
You talk about that idea of scoring for film and TV like there's no stone that goes unturned. And you sound like you're very thorough with your process, which is hugely important. A lot of the times these projects have tight deadlines. That approach requires a certain amount of time to be able to discover and fail and try and fail. And so how do you still enact that process among the reality of the constraints of a project?
Yeah. So the beauty of this scenario with a catalog of music is that I can temp a score in instantly. I can vibe on anything that I've done. I'm going through my Rolodex in my head and just remembering, like, this gig from, whatever 2004 is. It's recalling feelings for me. I'm going to go pull some music from that and see how it feels. So you can make these big broad strokes very quickly. And then, the beauty of technology is it's it's so flexible, right? Like, when I get into scoring something, I might take a piece of that score. I might take a piece of that cue and just say, you know what, give me the pads, give me the percussion, give me something that sort of sets me off into a direction, and then I'll build something off of it. So that's a huge time saver. I mean, where it takes typically, the 100 was like 500 cues or 500 tracks in a queue. And so, it was very time consuming, and I did it all alone. It was brutal. I did have a music editor that would help me. And he was amazing. But the reality is, it needed to be through composed, which means, there's no shortcuts. Um, and so, with that, it was nearly impossible. Like, you'd write maybe 6, 7 minutes of music a day. I was doing like 11 to 12 minutes of music a day, of that kind of epic music. It's just insane. Impossible to,
Yeah.
sustain that. So now I can score, 22 minutes in about 8 hours
Wow.
doing it this way. Yeah. And so it's really satisfying because you do get to maybe even a more inspired end, to be honest with you, because you're not having to generate every moment of inspiration. You know, you've got, and you have no idea how something that was supposed to play against this emotion and this moment, how it's going to work in a totally different, set of circumstances. It may work better, even though it wasn't designed for it. So again, the element of surprise is what keeps you feeling like you'll never retire. You're just constantly going, I can't believe that worked, but it works better than everything else. Because I can tell you that for me, if I realize my, vision that I think is genius, um, almost every time I think, I guess that wasn't a great idea, or it was just an average idea. Or how wrong was I? Because this is a process you have to feel your way through. This is art. It's not just a blackboard and a computation. And so, this is where humanity plays.
With it being art, how do you balance your artistic vision, but also the additional artists that are involved, like a director and producer and editor?
I mean, that's the best part of age,
Hmm.
right?
Can
Maturity. It's just that feeling that, we are all in service to the idea. We're all in service to each other. And we're just ushers to the ideas that are brought in from the ether. Um, the older I get, the less I exist. A lot of people that I knew that had kids would just talk about lost freedom, and their identity was gone, and that was sad to them. And so that's what scared me, like, oh, don't be that guy. And, when you meet somebody that you truly love and you want to spend your life together, you start to see things differently. You're like, oh, well, it would only make it better. And, I moved out when I was 15. I did not have a great childhood. I mean, looking back, it wasn't a bad childhood. Like, we had enough to eat. My dad didn't beat us up, beat my mom up. It was just, I felt misunderstood. I didn't feel like I saw the world like anyone else. And maybe I was just hard headed. And maybe, everybody was at fault. But once I had kids and I realized, oh no, this is not that. This is like the coolest thing ever. You realize like their success is better than your success. And even those tiny successes, like you're walking. Holy hell, look at you. You're talking. And it's all bizarre because, they start out as babies and they can't do anything and then they're doing stuff. You're like, wait a minute. Have you been able to do this the whole time? You've just been holding back. Like,
Yeah.
come on. So it's like a magic trick and it's bizarre and you never, get over it. You never get to the point where you don't want to see what happens next. And so when you're looking at that world that way, you're not looking at your world and putting it under the microscope and what could I do better and what could I do more of? And it's liberating, man. You look at what you do, in my case, music and sound, and you start going, well, it wasn't about what I thought it was about. So what is it about? It's about creativity. It's about getting to a finish line that everybody can high five around. And now I'm editing. I love editing. Editing. It's the coolest thing ever. And, for a long time, I didn't want to know anything about picture because I didn't want to fall out of love with movies. I wanted to go and watch a show or a movie and feel like the magic is still there. I don't know how you put that together. I don't want to know because I would hear the soundtrack and I would hear every mistake, every problem, everything that I could have done better. And you know what I mean? You don't want to put it under that microscope because everything's ugly under a microscope. And so, I tried to not know anything about picture and you live long enough and you start knowing some stuff. And now my view is entirely different. Like, no, this is amazing. Like, I would love to do what you do with visual effects.
Some rapid fire questions. Okay.
Yeah.
If you had infinite budget and could score anything on any subject, what would it be?
I love Blade Runner. I mean, I'm a sci-fi guy, and
Cool.
I think that, for me, like, I want to tell stories. That's what I do. I make these little bands where I can create a subject and I can just write songs in that lane, and just sort of stay, you know, in that story for the whole band. Right. And then I'll start a new band and I'll tell a different story. So I have a story that I'd like to make into a movie. So that band is called Less Friction, and I feel like if I could tell that story, then that's what I would do. I have a graphic novel being made, and I'm working on a whole volume of them about it that I can help sort of thread the needle. But but yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, if I can't do exactly that, then it's really about the people. If I can work with people that I love, then I kind of don't really care what the work is, whether it's a cartoon or a nature show or um, whatever, a horror movie. I mean, I've had just so much fun in different lanes that I never could have predicted, and would have thought, like, okay, I'm ready to be out of this lane, and I'm clearly not. It's still
Yeah.
really fun.
What are some of your favorite film scores?
So that's a tough question because there are so many different ones. But I love Vangelis. I love Thomas Newman. I think that he's bulletproof. Who walks into Bond, and I did the Bond trailers and like got to play the theme, and it was an incredible experience. And John Barry's got a lock on that, but somehow Newman comes in and does what he does, and I'm not sure. I might like it better. I mean, I just love him. I feel like the guy's just bulletproof. Wall-E, that opening sequence where first 25 minutes or whatever it is no dialogue. It's
Yeah.
just, it's brilliant. And it's
Yeah.
always brilliant.
Yeah.
He's great at finding articulations on instruments that no one else is using.
Mm.
He's great at inventing a palette, inventing a sound. I love Atticus Ross, and Trent Reznor, but I think Atticus is, again, like me, he's a sound designer, and that's what informs the composition. And so, whenever you feel like you haven't heard this before, I'm interested.
Yeah, that's cool. If you had to boil it down to one thing, what do you feel like you would attribute to getting to where you are now and accomplishing the things that you have?
I mean, I would say it's two things. It's hard work and luck. It's not one thing. You really have to love what you do, and you have to stick with it, persevere, and power through the hard times. I mean, I can't tell you how many people were in tears on that sofa behind me. And you just keep going because you trust yourself, you trust the process, and you're going to get to an end. And in the end, they're going to be smiling and cheering. Um, but the process, it can be very difficult, and so um I lucked out with my friend Brian Kerb. He's just somebody that I'll never want to not work with. And there have been others where I felt like I could have that, but with Brian it's just boom, boom, boom. Like every day there's something that I look forward to. And
That's cool.
so when you're loving what you do, you just can never see retiring.
Yeah. So, what advice would you give to other composers looking to break into the industry at this level?
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, I was the only one I knew that was doing all of the tasks, and in some ways it helped me, but I think in some ways it hurt me. And the world is totally different now. Like everybody's like me, it's necessity to survival. And and so that's what I would say is, if you really love sound and music, then love it all. Understand who made what and how it was made, and you'll be really surprised. Like, I know people that found their love for, doing lights and theater because they realize they're not actors, and they got behind the tech equipment. They're like, no, sound's not for me. It's just, I want to do the spotlight. Every day I get to the spotlight, I go, woohoo, who am I going to put this big, powerful light on? So it's really just about, you know, whatever it is that floats your goat, as it were. I
I love
mean,
that. Yeah,
yeah,
I love floating goats. That's like, yeah,
amen.
that's always the way to find success. Look for the floating goat.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you said, when the clock runs out and you go, "Oh hell, where did the time go?" That's the life best lived. Oh, I'm 90. Look, dead. Like
Yeah, yeah,
this entire time just like floated by. It's the ones that are contemplating their navel that are having a hard time, you know? Trying to occupy themselves, trying to go, why can't I make this happen? And the frustration sets in. If you're too busy, you never know. You never know. Like, oh, I was miserable the whole time. Like, how about it? Like, I mean, for me, it was about having a stack of records and, movies or whatever, like in the corner that sort of defined your legacy in your life. And now it's about the experiences, you know. I feel like you and I would have a great time laying bricks together. Like if that's what we did for a living, we would high five at the end of the day, drink a beer, and go, that was pretty fun. Like that was cool. Like there was some really funny stuff that was said. We made a wall. Like that's cool. And then we'd wake up and do it all over again. Our bodies would have a different kind of toll on them, but I think anything can be a good life. It's just a matter of really who you're doing it with, and if it's a task that doesn't make you miserable, because every task will make you miserable, and that's why we change lanes.
that is a beautiful way of looking at work. The idea of doing it with people that you enjoy and continuing to wake up every day and get a little bit better, push a little bit harder, and continue to do it with surround yourself with the people that you really enjoy.
I mean, progress is an addictive thing. I don't know if you've ever like done a car or a house where you're just sort of updating or resto modding or
Yeah,
making it better. Um, and I get into this mode where with tweaking, I just go, how else can we make this better? What box can I run this through? You know, what thing can I buy that will solve this problem? And like money is only good for making records sound better. Otherwise, like, okay, cars are awesome, houses are awesome, but it's really just better is what we're after, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. So, are there any upcoming projects that you're excited about, or ones that you just finished that you want to talk about?
Hell yeah. So one of those projects that I was mentioning earlier about storytelling is called the Spiritual Machines. And I don't know if you're familiar with singularity or the concept of spiritual machines, but
Mm-mm.
um, basically it is how technology is going to interact with humans. So, oh, I need an arm. Okay, here's a robot arm. I need a liver or a brain. Okay, we're going to do that. And so the question is, once we can back up our brains and live in the hard drive or in the cloud forever, like what will make us human? And so that's what I write about. What our fears are and how things are going to be better, and you're not going to feel physical pain, but yet we'll still suffer because it's what we do as humans. We bring it on ourselves. And so this is what I write about. I have a new record out called Lock Hearted. It comes out August 16th, and the first single is The Mirror and the Dancer that was just released. And there are going to be two other singles that are released before the album drops. Um, and I'm really excited about it because, I've updated all this tech to be sort of hybrid. And so, the idea is that I can recreate the sound of the record in our in-ear monitors, and we can play the record and not play to tracks, but feel like, oh, this actually sounds great. It sounds like a record. Um, and so, that, and then you infuse the reckless abandon that comes with rock and roll. And I think it puts on like a great show. So I'm excited about that. Um, and it's sort of, this is a project that I've been doing for a decade, and I've had a lot of ideas about what it means. I'm a watch guy. Watches are, my personal spiritual machine. Watches and cars. And so it was weird when the iPhone came along and nobody needed a watch anymore, and yet watches didn't disappear. There's something about them, it's not just aesthetic. It's like, it's an extension of you. There's a thing that we all sort of relate to about machines. And so I'm making a watch. I started Spiritual Machines timepieces so I could scratch that itch. And I've been designing, and I have a prototype coming in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited about it. But it sort of, evolved into this question, which is really more of a conversation. But what is your spiritual machine? I have a friend who is an artist, and for him, it's a mechanical pencil. For some people, it's a car. For some people, it's a gun. Like, it makes you powerful. It makes you complete. It makes you whole. It helps you with your livelihood. We're nothing without it, right? So for me, it's instruments, obviously, and gear, boxes with VU meters and bakelite knobs and transformers and tubes and like cool things. So, but it's different for everybody. And so I'm starting to podcast my own self
Cool.
about these spiritual machines, and, what are people afraid of? I want to like have the band interview people, and because we're all into the same stuff.
Yeah.
So, like,
Cool.
what's your spiritual machine? I'm sure, you could point to something that you're like, it's not just a laptop. There's
Yeah.
something where like the humanity is in it. I see myself in this.
Yeah. That is a great question. Um, the lawnmower comes to mind to get yard
Oh,
work done. Um,
yeah.
that's the productive side of my mind. But I feel like more so it'd probably be something instrumental. I am a pianist and drummer. I love the way that, yeah, pianos work. Thinking about that idea of being a mechanical machine, the way that the hammer is hitting the string and
Totally.
connected to the pedal and all this stuff.
Yeah.
That's
Well, think
cool.
about, speaking of pedals, the bass drum pedal, which
Yeah.
is what liberated the drummer to play a drum set. Like, if that's not a spiritual machine, I don't know what is. The hi-hat,
Yeah. Yeah.
up and down, open, close,
Yeah.
feet. Now my hands are available, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
I
nuts.
mean, these are incredible machines. Absolutely. And the lawnmower is great because, I love instant results, like these boxes with one knob where you turn, you're like, better, better,
Yeah.
better, keep going. I mean, you're not overwhelmed with possibilities. You just, what your thing is, and you go do it. Like the
Yeah.
lawnmower, there it is. Like,
There it
look at
is.
me, behind me, it's perfect.
That's awesome. That's so great. Cool. So how can listeners keep up with you, your work, future endeavors?
Yeah, I mean, spiritualmachines.com. My company is Woodwork Sound, WOULD, woodworksound.com. Um, everything is hosted on Source Audio, which is a platform for music catalogs. And so it's all there, and, contact info and all that. But yeah, Instagram, and I mean, I'm just getting started. I just started an Instagram. I have no idea how to do it, what to post, when to post, how to post, how to at people.
Yep.
So I
Yeah.
got a lot to learn. Fortunately, I do have kids, and they're pretty wise.
Yep.
So
Yeah, they're gonna be your best teachers for that. It's a whole other world.
yeah, yeah, it is. So, I mean, I always make these little records and just put them out there, and I don't say anything. I don't do anything. But something happened in this one where I want to play again. And so I got like these guys that are my old pals, and they are my spiritual machines. Like, I think like them, oh, when I'm going to play a keyboard part, I think of Craig and what he would play. And when I'm going to write a vocal, I write for Aaron, and I think, this is what Aaron's voice does. And so, you know, you have this sort of unspoken relationship going on,
Yeah.
and it's very spiritual. So it guides, and you know, I'm grateful for it. I never lose, touch with it. So it's funny how, like, you probably have people in your life that you're thinking about all the time, but you don't talk to them all the time, and you just sort of assume they know, and sometimes they don't know, and you kind of get on the phone. And you're like, dude, don't you know? Like, we've been having this whole conversation for like weeks, and you've been a part of it, and you don't seem attached to it at all. Like, what do I
So
have to do
true.
to bring you into it?
It's so true. Yep. It's like I have this whole dream for us.
Yeah.
Aren't you in? They're like, what dream? What?
Share, please.
Yeah, yeah,
Do share.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Evan, thank you so much for coming on today. It was so great to talk to you and even just catch some of the energy and charisma off of you that I feel even
Oh,
through the microphone. And it was an honor to get to hear from you, your journey, and the stuff that you're working on. I think there's a lot of great stuff for the listeners today. So thank you again for coming on, and we'll definitely need to have you on again and continue to talk about all this stuff because I'm sure we could talk hours.
thanks, Gavin. Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way. I said it. You and I are kindred spirits. We've been through a lot of the same stuff, and I think that our catharsis is a shared one. Like when you say something, I'm like, oh yeah, totally, I get it, and I feel like you get where I've been too. So yeah, I'll look forward to it for sure.
Thanks, Evan.
All right, pal. Have a great day.
You too.